Over the years, I've played and loved many games. Games that mean a lot to me for one reason or another. But there are few games that mean more to me than EarthBound. EarthBound, known in Japan as Mother 2, is a JRPG on the Super Nintendo. It's the second in a series of 3 games, the only of which to get an official English translation until its NES prequel, Mother, was re-released on the Wii U in 2015. EarthBound is a game which came to me in the right place at the right time. What started as an RPG that allured me with its colorful visuals and unique setting would quickly turn into my latest obsession and one of my favorite adventures in gaming that I'd end up revisiting year after year. Of course, I have a couple of goals with this video, but one stands tall among the rest. I want to get across why I adore this game so much. Ever since I first played it several years ago, I've found myself in love with nearly every aspect of it, and it's clear I'm not alone. Some of the most popular indie RPGs of all time cite EarthBound as a key inspiration for their conception. It's clear there's something special here. EarthBound is a game that resonates with me very deeply, along with thousands of others in what is potentially one of the most passionately devoted fan communities I've come across. Today, I'd like to explore why that is the case. After all, what is so special about this game? Well, without further ado, let's find out. EarthBound had quite a lengthy development cycle, lasting over 5 years. The development team consisted mostly of unmarried men who were willing to work overnight on the project. Despite their hard work, the team came under threats of cancellation at multiple points throughout its arduous development. Really, it wasn't until series creator Shigesato Itoi was joined by Satoru Iwata and his own team that a light began to shine at the end of the tunnel. It's safe to say that without Iwata's prowess, we may not have seen this game release at all, at least not in the state it's in. The scale of the game would grow increasingly throughout its formation. It started out development for an 8 megabit Super Nintendo cartridge before they switched it to 12 megabits and then later 24 megabits. Not very many games on the Super Nintendo had such a big cartridge size, and if they did, they usually had graphics that pushed the capabilities of the console. With EarthBound's style as simple as it is, I'd say that speaks for the game's sheer scale. Itoi struggled with the idea that he had to be finished working on the game at times, feeling as if he could continue working on it forever. Something that I, and I'm sure many other artists, can relate to. The game had continual delays before releasing in Japan as Mother 2 in August of 1994, and later being localized for North America as EarthBound in June of 1995. But why Mother? Probably sounds like an odd name for a game series, right? Well, Itoi wanted the games to have a sort of motherly quality to them, and this game is no exception, with themes of love and faith prevalent throughout. Itoi's father was a businessman, and a busy one at that. Naturally, his connection with his mother was far greater than with his father. It explains why your mother in this game is so caring, mending your spirits at your every visit, to the point where homesickness is an actual status ailment, while you only hear of your father through the telephone, never actually seeing him. A very deliberate choice and a very fitting one too. Getting back to it, EarthBound is still a pretty sick name in my opinion, but it does forego the original meaning of mother. Mother 2 released to pretty good sales numbers in Japan. However, its North American localization, EarthBound, unfortunately failed to take off despite its good reception. This could be attributed to a number of things. EarthBound wouldn't be released in North America until mid-1995. With the Super Nintendo on its way out, it's possible there was just a lack of interest in what was at the time a new IP for the Western world. Another reason could be the game's art direction being pretty simple at a time when developers fought for their consumers through battles of graphical prowess. There's also the fact that the game came packaged with a player's guide. An awesome one, sure, but it did undoubtedly bring down the game's sales due to the resultant increased price. But above all else, the reason which people point to the most for EarthBound's flop in North America is the marketing. Nintendo Power is the most infamous example of this, right? Warning, use only in a well-ventilated area, because this game stinks. Disgusting scratch and sniff stickers dotting the page, yuck. Now, gross out humor was pretty rampant in the US during the 90s, yeah, but using it to market a game rather than to make a joke probably turned a lot of people away, right? At the very least, it definitely did not give them a very good idea of what the game offered. Ultimately, EarthBound's lack of success over here is probably a result of all of the above, at least a little bit. But that's just its reception at launch, man. Starman.net. Yeah, this is where EarthBound's now sizable fanbase would really begin to take shape. Having been created in the late 90s, the website would really take off in the 2000s, drawing in fans old and new alike and spreading word about the game, resulting in its cult following today. I mean, you can hardly look at any list of top Super Nintendo games nowadays without seeing the game squeezed in there somewhere, right? EarthBound owes the vast majority of its fanbase to the internet. It's safe to say that it's solely responsible for propelling the game to its status today. It's also responsible for propelling this game into space. Yes, this actually happened. Yes, the cartridge still works. And yes, EarthBound is no longer EarthBound. I digress. People love this game. I love this game. I hardly know where to begin, so I'll take the logical route and start with the very first thing you see when you boot it up. Red static envelops the screen, accompanied by an eerie extraterrestrial tone. A scene fades in. A town overrun with UFOs. The caption, EarthBound, the war against Gygus. A really eye-catching way to start off. Then there's that title screen. White letters rush in from either side, a flash as they come together. An indigo background fades in, and the text is illuminated. EarthBound. I love this title screen, it's so pleasing to look at in spite of how simple it is. Its Japanese counterpart, Mother 2, also has a really clean looking one. They're up there among my favorites for sure. I feel similarly about the game's opening demo. The circle wipes revealing the game's cast and giving a sneak peek of the game's different locales is really neat. The striking tonal contrast between this and this really sets the stage for what to expect from this game, I feel. And here we are at the file select screen. Let's go ahead and start a new game. A little thing I love about this series is the ability to change your text box color. I tried to switch it up a lot while recording for this video. If I had to go with a favorite though, it's gotta be banana. Peanut is a close second though. A given throughout this series is the ability to name your party members whatever you'd like. I went with the defaults this time, but you can definitely have some fun with this. I definitely remember doing some playthroughs naming the party members after some of my friends, stuff like that. Are you sure? Yup. EarthBound takes place in the year 1990X. We begin here in Onet, a small town in Eagle Land. A boy named Ness peacefully sleeps when, all of a sudden... Outside, cops perch about at every corner, talking to them, giving us our first taste of this game's silly dialogue. As it turns out, a meteor has crashed at the top of the hill. Ness encounters his annoying neighbor, Pokey, pestering the police near the summit. With no way past, he returns home for some more rest when, shortly after... someone's knocking at the door. What an annoying knock. As it turns out, it's Pokey. Great. His little brother got lost among all the commotion, and he needs our help to go find him. So with Ness's dog King by his side and a cracked bat, he sets out to... okay, a phone call from Dad first. You actually call him up to save your game. Jeez, I've done it so much I know what he says word for word. Your dear old dad was thinking about hitting the hay for the night. I have created a record of your adventure to this point. Good night, sleep tight. Ness, you like to work hard, just like your mother. But I don't think it's good to work too hard. After heading outside, they start to come across some pretty mean animals, weirdly enough. After King runs back home out of fear, they find Pokey's little brother at the summit. Before leaving, however, a golden light shines down upon the meteor, accompanied by a certain buzzing noise. It's a bug. His name? Well, Buzz. A bee I am, not. I'm from 10 years in the future, and in the future, all is devastation. He says that the reason for the aggravated animals is Gygus, the quote, universal cosmic destroyer, attacking Earth slowly but surely by infecting the world with evil thoughts. A prophecy tells of 3 boys and a girl putting an end to his madness, and it's Buzz's opinion that Ness is one of those boys. After a brief ambush by one of Gygus's cohorts, they return to Pokey's house, well, not without a quick scolding, but thinking he's a dung beetle, Pokey's mom swats Buzz to the floor. In his dying words, Buzz gives Ness the Sound Stone and tells him to find the 8 power points of the world and capture their melodies into the stone before finding and confronting Gygus, telling him to call each of these places your sanctuary. EarthBound's exposition delivered through its first 30 minutes is great. It sets the tone for the rest of the game effectively, with its mix of goofy-ass banter and some pretty serious moments. While some may see it as a turnoff, I love how we're only given very vague information about Gygus, which will continue throughout the game. It sets you up to be intrigued by a villain shrouded in such mystery. Whereas most villains are pretty definable, it isn't even clear what Gygus is, and I think that's pretty badass. As the sun rises and Buzz's spirit fades away, a new dawn falls upon the world. The adventure begins. The story of EarthBound is one that's very memorable to me. Thrust straight into a new dawn after the goal is made clear, Ness's journey going forward is one of outlandish scenarios. As an example, the very first one. A rebellious ragtag gang in odd costumes invades Onett. Their home base, an arcade. Or a kidnapped young girl needs saving. Where's she being held hostage? In an insane cultist village that worships the color blue. Hell, even the damn cow is blue. And you can't forget when you've got to sit still for 3 entire minutes behind this waterfall to enter a dungeon. Seriously, the whole game is just filled with stuff like this, and they all have a common through line. Being a serious situation with wonderfully wacky subject matter sprinkled between the lines. It's endearing, and the Photo Man is there to capture your memories along the way. A lot of people like to hate on him, and yeah, I get that it can be kind of a pace breaker, but come on, floating down from the sky is pretty great, and he finds some pretty creative places to land. You gotta love how Ness is the only one smiling. I mean, come on, that peace sign is pretty iconic, man, especially paired against the cold stare of the girl beside him. That young girl, though, she's actually Paula, the second party member. She's from the town of Tucson, renowned for her psychic abilities, or PSI. Her family runs the preschool in town. She's closely followed by Jeff, a boarding school boy from Winters far to the north, and a master of gadgets and technology, prioritizing his knowledge and mechanical mastery rather than PSI. And then there's Pooh. Yes, Pooh, a martial artist from Dalam, a floating island to the far east, who joins the gang about halfway through the game, and the 4th and final party member to boot. I always really loved how diverse the gang is. I mean, a small town baseball kid, a prim and proper schoolgirl, a nerdy boarding school boy, and a damn black belt? Hell yeah, dude. Ness, Paula, Jeff, and Pooh, dubbed the Chosen Four by many, face many trials and tribulations throughout their journey to collect the 8 melodies, at times having their goal get derailed because of Gygus's henchmen. Couple this with Ness's neighbor, Pokey, constantly trying to one-up Ness out of his pure spite for him, and you've got a recipe for disaster. Strange, evil creatures now roam the land. From rabid animals and robots gone haywire to aliens, it's up to the 4 of them to fight back. And fight back they do. This is a turn-based RPG after all, so it's high time we take a look at that battle system. Something this game was praised for at the time was its use of enemies in the overworld rather than random encounters that plagued many of its contemporaries at the time, including its very own prequel. After encountering an enemy, either normally or through a first strike for you or them, the first thing you'll probably notice is that background. Yeah, these psychedelic, beautiful animations that serve as backdrops to the combat. Shigesato Itoi referred to these as video drugs, and one singular dude was hired on to create nearly 200 of these. 200! For 2 years, he worked solely on these backgrounds. What a legend, man. I love them. They're fantastic, trippy, and representative of the series at this point. The enemies in this game are, well, they're insane, dude. I mean, there's the standard stuff, your run-of-the-mill animals and such, but next thing you know, you'll be fighting cups of coffee, speed limit signs, and gigantic piles of puke. The enemy variety is simply incredible. Facing off against bosses at the end of dungeons, you'll come across and defeat 8 Sanctuary Guardians before recording the melody of the given power point into your soundstone. I think it's a really cool little detail that the enemies you fought in each Sanctuary dungeon fear you after you've defeated their boss. It makes you feel just a bit stronger after each one, and it's very satisfying to feel that growth. A little something I love about this game is that it can be played for the most part one-handed, using the D-pad to move around and the L button for most actions. So you can eat pizza and play EarthBound to your heart's content. You know, until you need the A button to open your inventory. How are the party members in battle though? Well, Ness is the tankiest of the bunch, boasting loads of offense and defense. His psychic ability is somewhat limited, but he is the only one who can utilize PSI Rockin'. Or, you know, whatever else you put as your favorite thing. Paula's the most fragile of the bunch, and while her physical offense is pretty lackluster, her psychic ability is monstrous. Particularly, her elemental attacks do big damage. She can also pray, which can have a myriad of different effects. It can be helpful at times, but usually it only tends to screw you over. Jeff's defense falls between the prior two. While he can't use PSI, you can find plenty of broken machinery throughout the game that he can fix with a high enough IQ stat. These devices can be super helpful for support, immobilizing foes, destroying their shields, stuff like that. His offense is fairly good too. I think he's my favorite party member just because of how unique he is. As for Pooh, he borrows many of his PSI moves from Paula, though he's got a few of his own. Particularly, he's the only one of the bunch who can utilize PSI Starstorm, rivaling PSI Rockin' in its sheer power. He's also fast as hell, so he's ideal for healing your party members at the start of the turn. He can even mirror other enemies. It doesn't always work, but when it does, it can be a really cool strategy in certain situations. There's plenty of other tactics to use in battle as well. Using consumable items to gain the upper hand is always satisfying. There's tons of different food items. You can even use condiments to increase their effectiveness, a really neat idea. Come to think of it, there's some pretty badass items you can find in this game in general. One of the more infamous ones is the Sword of Kings, Pooh's ultimate weapon that has a 1 in 128 chance of dropping from a Starman Super. Yeah, it took me a couple of hours to get this footage for something that isn't really worth it, but at least it's pretty cool. There's actually ultimate gear for all 4 party members. It could be a fun grind to get them all for sure, even if they're not exactly rewarding to obtain. It's too bad the inventory system kinda stinks. I mean, you'll run out of room almost immediately, come on. There's definitely some inventory management strategy here, I can acknowledge that for sure, but having gear and key items eat up inventory slots is sorta silly if you ask me. Something I use to aid this though is the for sale sign. I absolutely love this item. Stuck in the middle of a dungeon and found some better gear with a full inventory? Why would you just throw away your old shit when you can make bank on it, right? People will flock right to you to buy it, so you may as well. One of the more disappointing items is the rentable bicycle. I mean, on paper it's pretty badass, faster movement, and the R button becomes a bike bell, so what's not to love? Well, first of all, this shit gets caught on everything due to its big ass hitbox, but the larger issue lies in the fact that you can only ride the bike with one member in your party. Considering you get it about 30 minutes before adding Paula to your party, it's effectively useless. I always kinda wish that after gathering all 4 party members, you could upgrade your bike to a 4-seater one. I think that would have been pretty rad, but alas, its cycle of life is cut short. Anyway, back to battles. In terms of support like healing, stat buffs, shields, paralysis, there's some badass PSI moves here. Some I feel go underutilized by a lot of people, which is fair of course, you can get by most battles just fine without them after all, but they're fun to play around with honestly. One of the most useful is Flash. It can cause your enemies to tear up and miss their attacks, start attacking themselves, or just straight up kill them on the spot. The latter of which being luck of the draw, of course, but when it does happen, it's always such a cathartic moment. Moving our attention to the bottom of the screen, Itoy wanted to have the player's health be portrayed by pachinko balls that fly about when you get hit, one ball for every unit of HP. This was most likely scrapped because, well, the Super Nintendo likely wouldn't bode very well with thousands of little individual objects flying all over the screen. So instead, they opted for panels for each party member with rolling slot machine-like numbers, which aesthetically is still really cool in and of itself, but it also entails the ability to recover after a fatal blow if you're fast enough. This is perhaps my favorite thing about this game's battle system, that sheer panic when you hear that sound of a fatal blow, and the utter relief after finishing the battle just in time. It's incredible, man. It adds a whole new layer to the combat in this game that just simply isn't present in most other RPGs. Assuming one of your party members does die, you can revive them with certain items or even PSI later on in the game, but for the most part, you'll be heading to the hospital to nurse them back to sentience, and hotels to replenish your health and psychic points. You buy your latest gear from drug and department stores. Hell, you heal yourself with pizza and burgers, whether you buy them yourself or fish them out of the garbage can. If it's not abundantly clear already, EarthBound's setting is very contemporary. Most RPGs aim to have fantastical, primitive settings, but in EarthBound, it's the very opposite. Instead of medieval villages, there's small suburban towns and cities with gigantic skyscrapers. It's so unique and with a lot of variety as well. Man, my first time playing this game, I remember the legitimate excitement I felt traveling to each new area, because they're all so different. One minute you're in a haunted town invaded by zombies. The next, a vast desert where heat stroke is inevitable. And the next, an extensive Manhattan-like metropolis. It's such a joy to see that goalpost change because where it'll take you next is sure to knock your socks off. I think my favorite town in the game is Summers, an eternal tourist trap with outrageous prices, but a beautiful beach and a nice little port town. I just find it very serene here. And once you're used to that new normal, once you've come to terms with the present day setting, the rug gets pulled from under ya with ancient pyramids, prehistoric savannas, and secret alien bases. Bizarre, unconventional locales among the ones that make all too much sense. EarthBound is an eccentric and unpredictable game. It only makes sense that its settings are no exception. And when I say eccentric, I mean eccentric. If there's anything this game is known for, it's the incredible writing. I'd go as far as to say this is what elevates EarthBound from a great game to a phenomenal one. Some of my favorite quotes ever, they come from this game. Like this sign here. The flowers in the garden are representative of those in your heart. Treat them both nice. Or when you meet Jeff's father. Oh, you surprised me. Jeff wets his bed sometimes, but other than that, he's a good boy. There's this part here where you use zombie paper to stick a bunch of zombies to the floor. You know, like fly paper but for zombies. And my man over here says zombie paper really works, so I hope someone comes up with pretty girl paper. Oops, that wasn't a nice thing to say. Some great examples of how endearing this game can be. Oh my gosh, I love this dude here. Just a random businessman, right? What do you think he has to say? Last night there was a solitaire tournament. I lost my shirt. I'll invite you next time. Hey, wait, do you even know what solitaire is? This was my senior quote back in high school, man, I'm not gonna lie. It's the littlest things in this game that mean the most to me. I'll send my haunting melody throughout the town. Ooh, there's the couple of times you're offered a quick cup of coffee, which actually turn into these sorts of motivational narrations to push you forward. Just some really special, intimate moments that are unmatched by anything else I've played. I think my absolute favorite little side thing is in the Dusty Dunes desert. You could find this black sesame seed who tells us to apologize to the white sesame he hurt earlier. At the opposite end of the desert, you can actually find the white sesame who tells us that she still loves him. You can even go back to the Black Sesame afterward and he'll weep at the news. It's just the type of thing that you would likely miss your first time around. The type of detail that's tucked away with perfect subtlety, only known about by those who know the game inside and out. It's quite literally the smallest subplot that means so much to me. On the funnier side of the spectrum, we've got this house in Onett. This dude offers it to you for $7,500. Suffice to say, you'll have to come back later to afford it. If you do, you can enter and realize just how much you got ripped off. There's a hole in the floor, the couch is all raggedy, hell, the entire back wall is missing. But something you might not even think to check is this drawer over here, which actually contains a magazine. My Secret Life, Chapter 3. And it reads as follows. I was neither a murder suspect nor a target for an international spy organization, but I drove a car down Jersey Turnpike at 80 miles per hour. A police officer pulled me over and asked for my driver's license. He said I was going 20 miles per hour over the speed limit. I instantly pointed to my wife and said, "I'm in a hurry, my wife is in labor." Fortunately, my wife actually had a big stomach. I hoped he'd let me go with this excuse. "Oh, since it's an emergency, I'll lead you to the hospital with my police car," he said. "No, it's not necessary." "Why not?" asked the officer. Well, let's get going," said the officer. No, we can't! This baby is a demon child! I adore this shit, man. It's just the type of thing that you would only stumble upon accidentally. I mean, hell, that's just a taste of the game's attention to detail. I learn something new about this game every time I play it, and that is no exaggeration. Written generously throughout EarthBound is so much humor and so much heart. Something a lot of Super Nintendo games are praised for are their stunning visuals. Meticulously shaded landscapes, vivid color palettes, pushing the limits of the 16-bit console to the max. Despite being released near the end of the console's life cycle, it's safe to say EarthBound's graphics have never blown anyone away with their intricacy. After all, they're more crude than they are stunning, but that's not a bad thing, not at all. If anything, it adds to the game's charm. Vibrant, flashy hues dominate the screen, the world outlined in black. It's simple, like a Saturday morning cartoon, but its appearance manages to be so likable anyway. I love how this game looks. It's very visually appealing. The overworld is dotted with delightful little details that manage to stick out despite the limited graphics, from the pure joy of riding the bus to the subtle sway of the shoreline. Press X to open up your map, and you get these wonderful renditions of the towns you visit. These things have so much personality, and I guess I just love seeing everything so zoomed out. Every isometric building and bush accounted for. And this attention to detail extends to the battle system as well. This game's got tons of psychic moves, each with their own unique animations, and they're also pleasing to the eye. Jeff's gadgets often even have their own little animations in battle. It's really neat and makes him feel more included despite him having no psychic power, which I'm totally in favor of. In spite of their simplicity, EarthBound's aesthetics manage to be charming as hell. I think I've made it quite clear by now that EarthBound's scenarios and style are very zany, with writing that makes you do a double take at times. Most all of it came from the mind of a toy, who utilized what he dubbed reckless wildness, the integration of unconventional ideas into video games. But where did he draw inspiration from? Well, starting with the obvious, its prequel, Mother, now localized as EarthBound Beginnings. It's pretty clear that EarthBound borrowed its modern setting from Mother, and many of their characters look very similar to each other as well. One of the clearest inspirations for EarthBound's character design is Peanuts, and it shows. The proportions and faces are very similar to each other. I suppose for a cartoonish game so influenced by American culture, an American comic strip is a near inevitability. And yeah, this game really tries to portray and satirize America. I mean, come on. Ness, a young boy from Eagle Land who's from a small suburban town and is obsessed with baseball. Something I really love about this game, particularly the North American localization, is the fact that this is a Japanese game trying to portray America, written in Japanese, then translated into English. It leads to some really interesting, unique depictions of American culture. This is the type of thing you just simply don't see anymore. Most games release on the same day worldwide rather than month-long gaps between releases in different regions. Not to mention the fact that writing is a much more meticulous, carefully curated process nowadays to prevent things from being lost in translation as they often were back then. A few things were altered or censored for the game's North American localization, ranging from simple cultural differences to potentially controversial content. One of my favorite examples are these cultists who in Mother 2 have designs that would be a bit more problematic over here for obvious reasons. This was hilariously avoided in EarthBound by removing the writing on their hoods and adding a Santa Claus-style pom-pom to the end of them. People drinking alcohol at bars were replaced by people drinking coffee at cafes. You know, I could go on and on. EarthBound is filled to the brim with stuff like this, so we'd be here all day. But EarthBound is like a time capsule in these respects. It's probable that we won't see a game like it ever again, which is unfortunate, but at the same time sets it apart from really anything else. Another thing that differentiates it from the rest is its soundtrack. After all, EarthBound was one of the first video games to utilize sampling in its music, giving it sound like no other. The Beatles in particular are sampled a lot, giving the game a sort of flavor straight from the latter half of the 20th century. Although these more upbeat, jazzy, and at times otherworldly arrangements dominate the soundtrack, it also knows just how to mellow it down and keep things cozy for a little while. There really is no other soundtrack like it, especially nowadays with far too many games going for a more orchestral sort of sound. Like, I get the want to be cinematic and ambient, but where's the charm? Where's that upbeat funk that would set the game apart from the rest? EarthBound's soundtrack is very versatile. It knows exactly when to ramp up at moments of high tension, while also knowing when to be delicate and intimate, welcoming the player with open arms. It's brilliant. Next, I'll be covering the game's ending with a massive disclaimer. If you at all have any interest in playing this game, please skip to the timestamp on screen to skip spoilers. This game's finale is absolutely something worth experiencing yourself if you haven't already. I cannot stress that enough. But with that out of the way, after visiting all 8 sanctuary locations and collecting the 8 melodies, Ness suddenly loses consciousness. His childhood flashes before his eyes. He sees a brief vision of himself as an infant, having just been named moments earlier. Shortly thereafter, white fills the screen, before fading out to reveal Magicant, the realm of Ness's mind. This place is just awesome, man. Ness is a silent protagonist, something widely criticized nowadays, but a commonality back then. Nonetheless, getting a glimpse into his thoughts is a really neat idea. It's a joy to poke around his memories. The color palette changing with each person you talk to is a nice touch, and it gives him some characterization that he otherwise wouldn't get. I think my favorite little exchange here is with Ness's younger self. "It's me. I'm you when you were younger. Hey, let's play ball. Do you prefer reading comics or playing games? What? You're busy?" Just a beautiful line. It perfectly encapsulates just how much Ness has grown since the start of the adventure, and by extension, how it feels to grow up, too. Ness reaches the Sea of Eden, the evil part of his mind. Yeah, this quaint little oasis with that perfectly subtle music. After confronting and defeating the evil part of himself, which takes the form of the Mani Mani statue, something Gygas used to spread his influence in the modern day by giving people evil thoughts, Ness gains immense amounts of power. The 8 sanctuaries flash before his eyes, and he wakes up. Magicant is no more, and it's time to prepare for the finale. Throughout the game, Jeff's father, Dr. Andonuts, teams up with up-and-coming genius Apple Kid to create the Phase Distorter, a device capable of time travel for Ness and gang to use to confront Gygas, who we actually learn is attacking Earth from the past in a particular cave below the surface. That trumpet, dude. But there's one big catch. The device can't transport organic life to different time periods. So, despite no promise of being able to return, the 4 of them have their brains programmed into robots, activating the Phase Distorter to confront Gygas once and for all. Welcome to the Cave of the Past, the final area of the game. Some pretty tough enemies here, and a brilliant atmosphere. The audio track has gotta be one of my favorite uses of sampling in this game, being a slowed down snippet of the opening to the Beach Boys song Deirdre. It just fits so well here. Such an upbeat song used in such an unsettling context, it's the very pinnacle of what makes sampling so cool to me. At the end of the road lies this thin entrance, leading to this grotesque and kind of disturbing walkway. It's as if the very ground that you walk on is alive. A machine at the back end imitates Ness's likeness. Pokey appears in front of it, mocking them and claiming Gygus will defeat them. It becomes clear that Pokey was not only influenced by Gygus, but decided to join him as well. His hatred for Ness so strong, he gave up everything else in order to focus solely on defeating him. Pokey always felt lesser than Ness, so why not team up with his opposition? And so, he engages them in battle. This fight is really cool. The machine that fights alongside Pokey is possessed by Gygus, but since it depicts Ness, it uses his own PSI moves against you. And that music, you gotta love the chiptune sounding section near the beginning, yeah, but then, without warning, it goes metal as hell, dude. This sounds insane for a Super Nintendo game, that's for sure. After kicking Pokey's ass a bit, he turns off the machine and steps aside, releasing Gygus from his containment and revealing him for the very first time. That face is of pure agony. This game was rated K to A, man, now known as, E for everyone. It's no wonder they changed the rating to T for teen when they re-released it. EarthBound has its darker moments for sure, so it's only appropriate, I feel. Gygus isn't capable of thought. It's as if he's pre-programmed to slowly but surely consume and destroy everything in the universe. He's seemingly invincible. Pokey appears once again. Do you want to scream for help here in the dark? Why not call your mommy, Ness? Say, "Mommy, Daddy, I'm so frightened, I think I'm gonna wet my pants." I know you have telepathy or something, so just try and call for help, you pathetically weak heroes of so-called justice. And call for help they do. Paula utilizes her ability to pray to ask for the help of, well, anyone and everyone they've come across. Gygus becomes unstable, and his appearance becomes more and more unhinged. If you look close, you could see the shape of a fetus. Oh, it's like a haunted baby monitor, dude. Gygus' look was actually inspired by a traumatic experience a toy had as a child in which he walked into the wrong film at a theater and saw a disturbing murder scene that affected his well-being so much that it began to concern his parents. Utilizing such a traumatic experience to design something to be as terrifying as it can possibly be is pretty brilliant. Anyway, this is an amazing final boss fight. The more others pray for you, the more damage that's done to Gygus. It's satisfying as all hell, and very heartwarming to see those you helped so much want to return the favor. There's also the fact that you're quite literally fighting the background, which is pretty badass in and of itself. But the cherry on top, the climax of this game. About halfway through the story, you're asked what your name is. Yeah, you, the player. When Paula can't think of anyone else to call for help, her prayers become ineffective until you start to pray for their safety. Your name gradually revealing itself, and Gygus taking increasing amounts of damage, one pulverizing blow, ending it all. Ness. Now well, it's going to seem like I'm running away, but perhaps I'll just sneak away to another era to think about my next plan. It's a good bet that we will see each other again. Alright, I'll be seeing ya! So now which one of us do you think is the cool guy? The war against Gygus is over. Their souls rising from their robots and returning to their bodies. It really is over. Despite their newfound friendship, they say goodbye to each other for now. Pooh wanting to apply what he's learned to bettering his homeland, and Jeff wanting to study with his father. I love these little letters you can read afterward. One from Ness's mom, one from the children at Paula's preschool, and one from Jeff's roommate Tony. Really cute stuff. Paula asks Ness to escort her home, and so he does, saying goodbye for the last time. It's not over yet though. Well, not if you don't want it to be. With Gygus' influence gone, no more enemies roam the world. You can now travel around to your heart's content, retreading old grounds one last time. I love to take one last walk through each area. Some characters have new dialogue, and you can even return some of the game's rentable items. The attention to detail is immaculate for a part of the game most wouldn't fully explore, if at all. Hell, even one of my favorite and most overlooked items has a heartfelt description now, the for sale sign. For a long time, this for sale sign has been useful. Now it is old, its message made unreadable by the passage of time. It has now lost its effectiveness. Thank you, sign. Goodbye, sign. What other game would have such a tear-jerking message for a damn sign, for crying out loud? When you're ready, Ness can return home and maybe give his dad a quick call. He says he's trying his best to be home for Ness's birthday next week. The photo man brought an album by, says his mom, congratulating Ness before the game fades out and the credits begin. A cute curtain call of all the characters, followed by a staff roll, accompanied by the photo man's photos from throughout your journey, and the excellent song, Smiles and Tears. An appropriately named one at that. This game tugs at your heartstrings at times, and the ending is no exception. And the coolest part, you, the player, are in the credits. Pretty damn deserved after you canonically helped defeat Gygus, I guess. It's awesome regardless, and it's gotta be one of the most natural fourth wall breaks I've ever seen, up there with Conker's Bad Fur Day. Oh, another knock at the door, huh? Jeez, who could it be this time? It's Pokey's little brother, Picky. A letter arrived from my brother Pokey. It is addressed to Ness. There's no stamp, and it's not time for the mailman to come. Anyway, I brought it over. It says, "Come and get me, loser." Spankety, spankety, spankety. I wonder where he is. EarthBound is one of my favorite games ever made, and I don't expect that to ever change. It's not very hard for me to admit that, especially nowadays. The Mother series has a cult following like no other, and with this game celebrating its 30th anniversary this year, I have no doubt the community will celebrate in many different ways. This video is my way of celebrating. EarthBound is a game that will be remembered for generations to come. Its fans will make sure of that, I'm certain. My main goal with this video was to get across why this game is so special to me, and I sincerely hope I've achieved that much. Truthfully, I could continue talking for hours more and still not run out of things to talk about, but I think I've said just enough as to not start rambling. If you've played EarthBound, I'd love to hear what you think about it down in the comments below. Let's get a conversation going. If you haven't played it and it piques your interest at all whatsoever, I highly suggest you give it a go. It's not perfect. It's dated in a few aspects, sure. But in spite of all its imperfections, I think you'll find that there's a lot to love about EarthBound. Thank you so much for watching, and hopefully I'll see you all again soon. Bye.